Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We are super excited to welcome you. My name is Britt Oates. I am the manager of public programs here. And on behalf of myself and our entire team at Planet Word, we're super excited to welcome you to tonight's special program. This is the third in our programming series, Having Hard Conversations. Tonight, this is Working Across the Aisle. Van Jones in conversation with Tom Friedman. Exciting, right? How about another applause? Now, without further ado, let's welcome our super cool founder, Ann Friedman.
Hard conversations are happening all around us, and Planet Word's hope is to facilitate such hard conversations and to give people tools and pointers to make a conversation respectful, productive, and even-tempered, even if people deeply disagree. Tonight's moderator, my husband Tom, tries to do just that in his New York Times Foreign Affairs column. He hopes that people on all sides of an issue, and especially in the fractious Middle East, will still want to read what he writes because they trust him to be fair and to have listened seriously to their points of view. Our special guest tonight, our friend and CNN commentator, Van Jones, knows just how to straddle those divides too. Mr. Jones, included on many of CNN's political analysis panels, makes no apologies for his usual role as the liberal progressive voice on the panel. But in 2018, Van went to work with Congress and the Trump administration, his ideological opposites, if I do say so myself, to get groundbreaking prison reform legislation passed. That kind of bipartisan effort is rare but essential to moving our country forward. I hope tonight's discussion will enlighten us on how to see such cooperation and more of it in the future. We heard from our first speakers in the series, Michelle Norris and Tim Shriver, how they'd turned their aspirational concepts into concrete steps to help people have civil conversations and help make our country a more tolerant place. And tonight, I hope that we'll see another model for such needed work. Last Monday, the vice presidential candidates certainly talked the talk in their debate, going so far as to acknowledge some areas of agreement between them. So the question is, what if that was true? How would we encourage that spirit of potential cooperation and make it the norm instead of the rare exception? So, welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Pumpkin.
I think he means you.
I am Mr. Ann Friedman, and it is my real pleasure to be here tonight with my friend Van Jones. And believe it or not, Van and I have been friends for a long time. Began in the late 1990s. And I thought maybe we'd begin, Van, with reminding me how we met.
It was a life-changing moment for me. We were in Dalian, China, and I was there with a youth delegation fellowship program, and I had been working in Oakland, California. And this is just as the conversation about climate change was beginning, and you and Al Gore and others were beginning to get that conversation going. And I had been working to get low-income African-American kids jobs putting up solar panels. And that could become my passion. And it was beginning to work. And, but it was kind of weird. And it was way outside the mainstream, even in the Bay Area. And so I'm at the bottom of this escalator in China. And these escalators go like straight up for like a very long period of time. And I'm on the escalator, minding my own business. I look up, and there coming down is Tom Friedman. And I thought to myself, this is a horrible moment for me. At least if you meet your hero, you're supposed to be stuck in an elevator, and you have an elevator pitch, right? So an elevator pitch is like, you know, maybe 3 or 4, 5, 6 floors. You get, what, 30 seconds, 90 seconds, 3 minutes? Like, what's your elevator pitch? Whenever you met your hero, you have an elevator. So this is an escalator pitch. This is not going to work. This guy is going to go zipping that way. I'm going to go zipping this way, and I'm never going to see him again in life. And so words. So I'm thinking to myself, what can I say to this man? The most famous journalist in the world. I'm a nobody from Oakland. And I say, as he gets closer, I say, Mr. Friedman, my name is Van Jones. I'm working in Oakland. We believe in green jobs, not jails. Really good. Really good. Right?
It's true.
And so zipping past me as I say this is like literally Tom Friedman. And then beat. He turns back and goes, that's good. Now, I don't know how I got back down or if I got back down. I don't really remember how, but I got his information. And then the Clinton Global Initiative was shortly after, and you were there, and you agreed to, emailed you, and you agreed to sit down and talk with me. And, you know, many people want to talk with the guy. He says, let's get away from here. And we go 3 blocks away to like a little cafe, and we sit down, and he pulls out his laptop, and he's asked me questions, and I'm answering them, and he says, this is really interesting. He says, has anyone ever written about this? And I said, no, sir. He goes, someone's about to. And literally 3 weeks later, he writes his column about what we're doing in Oakland, and it's the beginning of my career on the national stage. And that's the power of words.
Bless your heart. Occasionally I get one right. Van, one of the things that we've never talked about, I'm really curious, because you have been a bridge builder, but without muffling your words. You know, you don't suffer fools, but you don't take any BS. But yet you managed to be a bridge builder. Talk for a second about just where you grew up, where that came from, where did that impulse come from, and how did you nurture that to become the person you are now?
Well, I mean, I think probably the most important thing I can say about myself is that I'm Willie Jones's son. That does not mean a lot in Washington, D.C. But in Jackson, Tennessee, where I grew up, that meant a lot. My father was born in 1944 in segregation and poverty in a place called Orange Mound, Memphis. I don't know if anybody knows the South very well, but it was the biggest black ghetto in the South. And my dad grew up there on Cable Street. And he grew up in what you would call a shotgun shack. Now, some of you know what that means. For those of you who don't, there are levels to shacks. All shacks aren't the same. So a shotgun shack is a shack where the parcel of land is so narrow that the house is built with one room behind another room behind another room. So you could fire a shotgun, hit everybody in the house. That's a shotgun shack. So my father grew up in a shotgun shack on Cable Street in Memphis, Tennessee in 44. To get out of poverty, my dad joined the military. And in the 60s, everybody was trying to get out of the military. But my dad went into the military to get out of poverty. And then he left the military, and he put himself through college with a GI Bill. And he went to a little black college called Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. And he married the college president's daughter, my mother, because my dad had it like that. And then my sister and I were born. I have a twin sister. And then my father working with my mom, put his little brother through college, my Uncle Milton. And then he put my Aunt Sylvia through college. And basically everybody in my family that got out of poverty on this bridge called Willie Jones's back. And when he died, the picture they put of him on the funeral program was my dad standing in front of Yale Law School the day I graduated with his hands in the air. And that's my guy. And so I've really struggled my whole life to how do I catch my dad? You know, like he started out with literally nothing. Gave me and my sister literally everything. And when he died, there was a around the block, black and white, because he'd become an educator, took over failing school, turned it around, got state awards. And so there was black and white around the corner telling my dad goodbye. And you look at that and you think, how do you catch that guy? And the one thing that he was amazing at was bringing people together to help children. He was a tough son of a gun. He was tough. He was not kind. He shook hands with him like shaking hands with a brick. In fact, I told my dad, I said, you know, there's a movie about a guy like you. What are you talking about? I said, there's a movie. It's got Morgan Freeman in it. It's about a principal who turns around a whole school just like you did. He goes, what is it called? I said, it's called Lean on Me. He said, lean on your damn self. True story. So, but he could bring people together and he could get stuff done to help kids. And so I saw him do it. Yeah. I saw him do it in very tough circumstances. We were desegregating my home county schools. And it stayed with me. And I liked that he didn't BS people, very direct, but he knew what he cared about, which was poor kids. And he got a lot of kids out, not just his own family, we got a lot of kids out.
But he taught you something, obviously, really deep there, Van, it sounds like to me. And it wasn't just to be a good talker, but to be a good listener, because that's always struck me about you.
Thank you, brother.
I've been working on a book myself. The tentative title is What You Say When You Listen. Biggest lesson I learned I was a little Jewish kid from Minnesota who wanted to cover the Arab Muslim world in the 70s. Not a natural thing, okay? And I didn't want to go out there and say, you're all great, you're all wonderful, it's all the other guy's fault. You know, I'm actually in everybody's face a lot. But my survival method is to be a good listener, because I discovered there are two things happen when you listen. One is what you learn when you listen. All the stories I got wrong were because I was talking when I should have been listening. But much more important is what you say when you listen, because listening is a sign of respect. And it's amazing what people will let you say to and about them if they think you respect them. And if they don't think you respect them, you can't tell them the sky's dark right now, okay? So that always struck me about you. You're really, I've seen you in a lot of contexts. You're always a respectful listener. Is that something you got from your dad, or is it something that that was your learning along the way?
You know, I think if you grow up in a small town, you're going to see the same people the next weekend at the laundromat. You're going to see the same people the next weekend at the grocery store or at church. And you just don't have the space to be shitty to everybody. Whereas I think if you live in a big city, you grow up on the coast, social media. So for me, part of the survival skill, and also, again, I was born in '68. Yeah. So you're going through desegregation. So part of the survival kids thing even for kids is you got to have a high school that works. You can try to figure out all the things we don't agree on, and you're going to have a really terrible high school. Or you can try to find something you agree on. And I just got, I think one reason in our party, I'm a Democrat in case you guys didn't know. I think one reason why in our party the people who do the best are often from the South. And you think about a Jimmy Carter, you think about a Bill Clinton, you think about even an Al Gore. You just grow up having to get along with folks. And also you just don't have that many syllables to work with. Yeah. So that was the hardest thing for me going to Ivy League schools. Like, wow, it's a lot of syllables. These are very long words. Whereas where I'm from, it's like, well, how you feel about the governor? Well, I'm for him. Well, I'm against it. Well, how's your mama? Well, My mom's doing, how's your mom? I mean, like, you don't spend that much time, on this stuff. And so, but I also really, really deeply believe that we need each other. I really believe that we need each other. I'm very proud Democrat, proud to be on the progressive wing. I was a progressive Democrat when it wasn't popular. But you do not want me in charge by myself, or we will be broke. I'm going to feed the babies. Just feed them, give them what they, I'm not going to ask a lot of questions about whether that's financially prudent. So you need a conservative sitting next to me saying, hold on a second. How much does that cost? Who's going to pay for it? Is that the right role of government in the first place? Could the private sector do it? What about families? You need somebody to balance me out because I'm just going to bankrupt you and then we'll figure it out later. And also, I think conservatives need people like me because I'm going to be pointing to what I learned about in my church as the least of these. I was taught in Sunday school, Jesus would judge you based on how you treated the least of these, the addicted, the convicted, the evicted, the afflicted, the least of these. And so I'm going to constantly be pointing out, what about the people who've been left out and left behind? I've never seen a bird fly with only a left wing. Not even in Berkeley, California. I've never seen a bird fly with only a left wing. Even in Tennessee, never seen a bird fly with only a right wing. We need each other. And so if you know that from the beginning, that there's something the other person has that will make this thing better, that will make my idea better, that will make the outcome better, then you listen differently. Than if you assume this person is a racist and a bigot and a cult member and a fool and an idiot, by the time you finish writing that script, they could literally be telling you anything and you can't hear them because you've drowned them out with your own internal disrespectful dialogue. And so I work very hard to listen from the point of view of, and again, I'm a person of faith and nobody else has to be, but I try to listen from the point of view, what if God is trying to hide something that I need to know in the mouth of my enemy? Right? What if that's the game I play with myself. Like, okay, God, all right, well, and in my mind, I'm like, that was racist. That was terrible. But wait a minute. That's interesting. I'm trying to catch him doing something right. I'm trying to catch him saying something I didn't know. And then it turns out you can almost win. You can almost always win if you play that game. And you come away with something. You already have the adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
You came in with that, you leave with that. But can you come out with something not that? And even on live television. Like, Scott's sitting there saying his stuff. I'm listening. I'm listening.
So your philosophy, Van, you are someone I would describe as a both-and person, not an either-or person. So in working on my book, I came across this graph in Axios. It was polarization in America, 1896 to the present.
Wow.
So super high in 1896. Don't remember what was going on exactly. Then goes right down here to 1953, most depolarized moment. Then back up to the present. Looks like a big V. I was born at the nadir, 1953, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when it was an incredibly moderate place and I saw government work. I saw politics work. And so that had a huge impact on me. And when I lean both and, not either or. I'm for a high wall and a big gate. Okay. I'm for two states for two people. I'm for the green driven by the market. I'm a bastard for peace in the Middle East. It's just so interesting to hear you, because you ended up in the same place but came at it from a different direction. And to me, the crystallization of it was your work with the Trump administration, listening to something come out of their mouths around prison reform. So walk us through that, because that had to be a series of hard conversations. How did it get started? How did it evolve?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the middle of the war between CNN, where I work, and the Trump administration, it was just, as you guys may remember, we didn't get along very well. And And it started off really bad in that when Donald Trump won, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, took my boss, Jeff Zucker, out for a meal. And he said, and it was reported later, that it was a new day in D.C., that if CNN wanted any access to the Trump White House, they were going to have to demonstrate that they were going to be fair and that they were going to knock it off. And the way that they could demonstrate that they were going to be fair was to fire Ana Navarro and fire Van Jones. That was a requirement. If they wanted any access to CNN, fire Ana Navarro and fire Van Jones because they were too tough on Donald Trump. I thought that was unfriendly. I didn't strike me as friendly. So and it leaked immediately because, and by the way, I should have sent him a thank you card because that meant I could never be fired at CNN.
Right.
Like, you know, it's like,
talk about job security.
It's like, let's talk about job security. Like, I don't even have to come to work anymore. But, you know, I wasn't happy about that. So I went on air that next night and I said, Jared Kushner is riding his tricycle around in the Oval Office and needs to get a real job. And so, you know, again, I don't mix words. He thought that was unfriendly. So we didn't start off in a good place at all. And now, backstory, because I had a TV show called Crossfire with a guy named Newt Gingrich, yeah. I had developed a relationship with a conservative at the national level, and he had schooled me on a couple things. We had been on air, and we'd been debating about criminal justice stuff. And the commercial break, he said, "Why are you going so easy on me?" I said, "I don't think I'm going easy on you at all. I've said that, you know, the incarceration industry is a racist industry. It targets the poor." He goes, "Yeah, that's all stuff that you liberals want to talk about." He said, "But man, I'm a conservative." This is Newt Gingrich, and I can't support the existing prison industry. I said, "What?" He goes, "Man," he says, "first of all, you're now talking about a big failed government bureaucracy that produces worse outcomes every year and then benefits as a result of it through a revolving door. As a fiscal conservative, I can't support that." He said, "I have libertarians in my party who think the government should have a lot less power over individual lives, at least on personal choices." He said, "You never mentioned that." He said, "Also, man, I'm a conservative Catholic." He says, "Where is the redemption? Where's the second chances?" He says, somebody leaves a physical prison, now they're in a social prison, they can't get a job, they can't get a student loan. He says, where's the redemption? He says, "Man, how does a fallen sinner rise in a system like this?" He says, "You never talk about that." And I said, "Where you been all my life?" You know, I was like, say a little more, you know, like, what is this? So he said, "Dan, Republican governors for the past, at that point, 6 years, have been closing prisons in Texas, closing prisons in Georgia, reforming prisons, and you've given us no credit." I said, "I didn't even know it was happening." And I looked into it, he was correct. And so I realized that we were talking past each other. I was using justice language, which is very important, and he was using liberty language, which is a different but deeply rooted American set of values. And there was a liberty movement happening in southern states to save money, to have less crime, and I had missed the whole thing. And I was still beating up Republicans as if it was still 88 with, you know, Dukakis and Willie Horton. So I knew, and then Newt and I worked together. We got some bills done, working with Governor Deal in Georgia and a few other things. So I knew that there was a conservative case to be made for reform, and it was being made, but certainly Donald Trump had not run on that at all. And he tried to get me fired. So I was not very happy with Donald Trump or Jared Kushner. And then I got a phone call that Jared Kushner wanted to talk to me. And I was like, more than happy to talk to this MF. More than, please put his ass through. I cannot wait to tell him a thing or two. Please put Jared Kushner through. And he got on the phone and he said, look, Van, obviously you and I see things very differently, but I want you to know something. My father went to prison. My father served time in federal prison. And I went to see him every weekend. And I saw how they treat people. I saw how broken our system is. He said, Van, as much money as we had, when my father was in federal prison, nobody at the White House level gave a damn. Nobody tried to help us. And now I'm sitting here and I want to do something. And everybody tells me, you're the guy who I should talk to. And I said, shit. This is terrible. This is going to work out very badly for me. I don't want to talk to you about this. This is horrible. And then I caught myself. And I said to myself, you know something? The whole time Obama was in office, myself and every well-known African American was in there begging for criminal justice reform, prison industrial complex, mass incarceration. Mr. President, do something. And now there's a different guy in there, and nobody wants to even go near the door. Which means there are 200,000 people who are locked up in federal prison who won't have an advocate for 4 years, maybe 8 years, maybe 12, maybe 16. Maybe Ivanka's going to run. I don't know. Do I really believe what I say when I say I want to stand for the least of these? Because now they don't have an advocate except for one guy named Jared Kushner who's sitting in the Oval Office or right next to it who's asking for my help. And I'd already been, as you remember, canceled by the right wing when I worked for Obama. And the right wing realized I'd been a left-wing berserkly activist in my youth. And Glenn Beck turned me into a 17-day-in-a-row story, and I had to leave the Obama White House under fire. So I was probably patient zero for cancellation in the first place. So I knew what that was. I didn't have to guess. And now I'm going to wind up getting canceled by the right because to stand near or touch the doorknob of the Trump White House is to immediately make yourself suspect, if not an enemy, to every progressive in the world. But I thought about the people that I knew in jail, in prison. And I thought about what it meant for somebody to be in that building who might care about them, and somebody as smart and tough as Jared Kushner. And I thought about, you know what, maybe I'm going to get beat up on Twitter. Maybe I'm going to get beat up on social media. But my worst day on Twitter is better than anybody's best day in federal prison. My worst day on Twitter is better than anybody's best day in federal prison. And I never met anybody in prison who told me, I'm in here, I'm being brutalized, I miss my mom, I miss my children, I want to go home. Please, Van Jones, help me. But whatever you do, don't talk to any Republicans. That's not what anybody in prison ever says. They say, I need help. I need help. And so I told them, I said, look, I said, Jared, I'm going to tell you like I said, I'm going to tell you in the only ways I can tell you, which is I got to quote my friend Jay-Z. I said, Jared, with you, I got 99 problems, but prisons ain't one. And if you're serious about this, I'll fight with you till the last dog barks. And he's still somebody who I think is very misunderstood. His family was almost wiped out in the Holocaust, so he'll do anything for Israel. And his father was really, really badly treated in the federal prison system, and he'll do anything for people behind bars. And we joined forces, Hakeem Jeffries, a few other people, and as you remember, we got counted out a bunch of times, but on the last day, just to show you how things work, in the the rump session after the midterm elections, on the last possible day, 12 hours before the government shut down for the biggest government shutdown. You know, Trump, people forget the Trump shutdown, the biggest government shutdown. 12 hours before that, we got that bill passed, and I am standing in the Oval Office with Donald Trump signing a bill that let 35,000 people out of federal prison. Everybody forgets this. 35,000 people out of federal prison. And by the way, ordinarily by now, about 70% of those people will be back in trouble, back behind bars. We don't do well. But because of the way that thing was structured, because we had to go back and forth between the left and the right and take out dumb things and put in smart things and argue and try to figure this thing out, design it the right way and get it passed through the House and the Senate and the House again, and Donald Trump to sign it, it wasn't 70% of people that got in trouble again. It wasn't 60% of people that got out of trouble. It wasn't 50% of people who got in trouble. It wasn't 40%. It wasn't 30%. It wasn't 20%. 15% of people got in trouble again. Half of that were technical violations. 8% people back in jail. The most successful prison reform in the history of prisons, signed by Donald Trump, and he handed me the pen. That's what's available. That's what's available when you put the people who need help before politics.
Beautiful, thank you. When we talked about it this summer, I actually texted Jared, and I said, I was having lunch with Van, and he said, "You never told him a lie." That's true. And he texted back, "Well, that's a low bar." But I really appreciate it. Yeah.
But it's true. The thing about it is, in Washington, D.C., you guys may have noticed, you go meet with these politicians and whatever, you're advocating for something, and you know what? They always agree with you. You're right. That's amazing. We'll get back to you. And they never do. And it's just the way that people are in this town. Jared was so new to politics, he didn't know any better than to tell us, "Well, that's stupid. We're never doing that." I'm like, "What? A fact? Like actual?" He goes, "Oh, man, why would we do that? If we did that, he would do this and she would do that. We're not going to do that. Maybe this." I'm like, "Are you actually talking to me like a person? Like we're trying to solve a problem and not just bullshitting each other for a press release tomorrow?" And so, yeah, so look, I work with everybody in politics. They all shade or lie or whatever. Jared was so new that he just literally told you what he thought. And that was kind of why we won.
Amazing. Van, you've been a pioneer in what is really a difficult conversation right now about October 7th. Between the black community, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, Jewish community. Talk about that. Talk about the challenge of that. That is one hard conversation I know quite well. Tell me how you got into it and how you think we navigated to a better place.
Well, first of all, my godmother is Dottie Zellner, who was one of the Jewish kids who went south in '64 for Freedom Summer. Three of her friends were murdered, 2 Jewish kids and a black kid, Freedom Summer '64. And so she taught me a lot. You know, she took me under her wing when I was in my early 20s and was lost. I was at Yale Law School. I didn't know what I was doing. I was far from home, and and she was working as a legal aide at Center for Constitutional Rights, and took me under her wing, and took me to Israel, took me to the West Bank, took me to Gaza before Hamas took over, took me to Yad Vashem, took me to Tel Aviv, took me to Masada. So I know the Holy Land pretty well. Now she's atheist, left wing, whatever, but she knows my faith, and so I always start with Dottie Zellner, but because I know that, because I know her, and she doesn't agree with all my. She's way left wing, and I'm according to her, I'm pretty moderate, but because of her, I know the importance of the Black-Jewish alliance. and I just want to take a few words to talk about it, because we don't talk about it enough. Because if you don't understand the roots of a thing, then you don't understand, you know, how precious it is. So I think it's hard for people to remember, but in 1909, there was a situation that was so horrific in the United States in terms of Jim Crow, terror, racist terror. It was so horrible here for black people and Jewish people that what we were doing in the United States is what inspired Hitler. Hitler was inspired by just the massive brutality and legalized brutality against blacks and Jews here. The Afrikaners in South Africa, who created apartheid, were actually inspired. They took word for word laws from here, there. That's how bad it was. And you have to understand, up until that point, there was no roadmap forward. There had never been a former slave state that had become, through a civil war, an apartheid state, a racist apartheid state, not a democratic republic, by the way. The founders started the process of creating a democratic republic. But in 1909, you have a former slave state that is a racist apartheid terror regime. And there had never been a pathway out of that to a democratic republic. And so black and Jewish people's backs against the wall joined forces, and they created a black-Jewish alliance called the NAACP. The NAACP is a black-Jewish alliance founded in 1909. Jewish people were not considered white. It's colored people. They were not considered white. And so the NAACP is a black-Jewish alliance to begin to design and roll back this apartheid state. And then the next year, an organization that we now call the Urban League was also created, another black-Jewish alliance. And if you look at the rest of that century, decade after decade after decade, what you find is a disproportionate number of black people and Jewish people working together. Now, you can overstate this. It is not true. It is, in fact, a lie that there was a time when all black people and all Jewish people loved each other and worked together. That never happened. There have always been some black people that did not like Jewish people. There have always been some black people that did not like Jewish people. There have always been some Jewish people that did not like black people. We all have some terrible cousins and awful uncles, okay? So we don't have to overstate it. But that makes it even more remarkable. Because what is true is that the best people in the Jewish community have always believed in repairing the world. The cultural DNA of the Jewish community is repair the world. And the best people in the black community have always believed in justice for all. Not for some, justice for all. And so the best people in the black community and the best people in the Jewish community have always worked together. And decade after decade after decade, you get to World War II, where Hitler is murdering Jews and whites in America don't want Jews here. It's the black colleges that raise our hands and say, well, send us the scholars. Send us the intellectuals. And that's why you have so many Jewish scholars who wind up in black colleges. You look at the 60s, you know the whole story, but it doesn't stop. It never stops. It never stops. All the way up until now. You look at black colleges right now who are donating the money for the scholarships. So many Jewish names. You look at so many black causes now. Young Jewish kids will go to fancy schools and then join Teach for America and work in neighborhoods that I've been trying to get out of. They're going there to help out. It's never stopped. You've always had that black-Jewish alliance. And in fact, you could go so far, and this might be pushing it, but I will push it. You could go so far to say is that what you now call American democracy was co-authored and co-created disproportionately by these two groups, blacks and Jews. And there is no example in human history of two groups, backs against the wall, facing those kinds of odds, who've done that much good for that many people for that long period of time. And so for that to be falling apart now is a world historic tragedy. I, unlike a lot of my friends, I'm not worried about Jewish people. I'm not. Jewish people have been around for 3,000 years. There'll be Jewish people on Mars. Jewish people are hard to stop. I'm not worried about Jewish people. I'm not worried about black people. We put up with 400 years of bullshit, and we're still here. Very hard to stop. I'm worried about everybody else. I'm worried about everybody else. Because who is going to step up then if the two groups with this cultural DNA back away from each other and now become enemies, that puts at risk democracy itself. The fight to deepen and defend democracy has been disproportionately borne by these two groups together. You drive a wedge between those two groups, you can collapse Western civilization. And that's what Iran is trying to do. That's what Russia is trying to do. That's what China is trying to do. It is not an accident that there is this deliberate, online, relentless, persistent attempt to drive these groups apart, which is not to say that I agree with Israel's policy in Gaza, which is not to say that I think all African Americans are perfect. We are quite imperfect in our persons and in our policies, but we do have a special role to play. And I refuse to allow on my watch us to be turned into enemies when this is the time when we all need a lot more friends.
Bless you. Bless you. Van, we have a great audience here, and we're going to be broadcasting this all over, but I want to give them a chance. I could ask questions all night, but I want to give them a chance. These good people have come out to Planet Word tonight, so we've got microphones, and raise your hand if you've got a question for Van. Right here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Friedman. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. My name is Arjun Singh. I'm a journalist here in Washington, D.C. And my question is, you've talked a lot about how to have conversations, how to find agreement. Why is that not happening now? Why are we polarized? What's the genesis for why your thesis right now is failing?
Good question.
I think most people make their decisions based on three things: the level of information, the level of inspiration, and the quality of their incentives. That's basically, if you think about how you act, it's what do you know, what do you care about, and what are the carrots and sticks that are going to be used against you if you go this way, if you go that way. I think we now live in a world where the incentives are really, really bad. Like, you have to be a little nuts like me to be willing to go up against the incentive structure. Like, I lost a lot of friends working with the Trump administration. There are people who passed bipartisan bills before. They didn't lose their friends. I lost funders. We ran a campaign that said that delivered what the New York Times called, not Fox News, the New York Times said was the most substantial breakthrough on criminal justice in a generation. And liberal foundations stopped funding me for it. That's a horrific incentive structure. So where does that come from? Why is that? I put the blame a lot on social media. I think these platforms are not designed to give us information anymore. They're designed to give you endorphins. So you hold these devices closer than you hold anything besides your lovers and your babies. You don't hold anything this close. Only your lover and your baby do you hold this close. You don't hold them all day. And that thing is not trying to give you information. It's trying to give you endorphins. So once it realizes, oh, you're slightly pro-Trump, it's just going to keep giving you information about Trump until you're like a lunatic, or you're slightly against Trump. Same thing, right? Because it's all about the endorphins to keep you on this device, even if it's telling you lies. And so I put a lot of the weight on social media. The information that you get is horrible. The inspiration that you get is negative. It's negative partisanship. And the incentives that it sets up are, I think, destructive. Now, that may not be all of it, but for somebody like myself who's in the public eye, I've had to do, I have 2 therapists trying to deal with the level of hostility from my own community and from my own party because I'm an independent progressive. So that's a part of the answer. It's a much bigger answer, I'm sure, but from where I sit, that's a big barrier.
So I think I've told this before, but I've never looked at Twitter, I've never looked at Facebook, and I've never smoked a cigarette. And my plan is to die saying all 3. Yeah. And because of that, I joke, man, but in my world, everybody likes me. Okay? Because I never see any of the other stuff. So I highly recommend it. More questions. Who else has a question? Don't be shy. Please, right here, Jeff.
I'd like to circle back to the young man on the escalator. Back in those days, I've been a fan of yours and Green for All from when you started, from the beginning. It's been a model for work that I've done throughout my career. And we're here at Planet
There's a great solar entrepreneur here at the community level, doing amazing work with this foundation. But go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you. We're here at Planet Word, and we have this divide, and we're talking across the aisle, and neighbor against neighbor, and coalition building. What's the language? What are the discussions? And what are the words that can help us talk in a way that's going to bridge that divide? How do we talk about this real existential issue?
Jeff, in general or particularly on the climate issue?
On the climate issue.
Yeah, in that domain, it's really the words that we don't use that's more important. When I'm working with Republicans, I never use the term climate. I just don't use it because it's become a tribal tag, so I talk about nature. Like, nature is good. Nature is a good thing. I talk about innovation. All the stuff that we've talked about for years. But what I would say is that on some of this stuff, it's not about what we're saying. It's who we're being when we're saying it. It's who we're being when we say it. I think progressives have fallen into some traps here. High IQ, low EQ traps. Very smart and very dumb because we're very smart. And so nobody likes to be talked down to. Nobody likes to be talked at. People can, and you talk about this in the Middle East all the time, people can spot disrespect at 1,000 yards. They can spot condescension at 1,000,000 yards. And so, and also I think we do this thing on the progressive left where we're very interested in identity, which can be important. But the thing about identity is, the big question is, are you like me? Are you like me? Are you black like me? Are you a lesbian like me? Do you vote like me? Are you like me? And that can be very important because sometimes those differences have been, pushed to the side when they shouldn't have been. So I get it. But the problem is that when you're trying to get something done and you've got to get somebody to do something hard, the big question isn't, are you like me? The big question is, do you like me? Do you like me? Do you see me? Am I just a white guy who's a Republican? Am I just, somebody who needs to be talked to and educated? Sometimes we leave people with the impression that we don't like them very much, that we actually think the world would be better off if they weren't around, or worse, that they need to be, it's almost a colonial mindset. They need to be conquered and converted. Like all these people who live in the red states, who live in dumb fuckistan, like all these idiots, right? And if we could just go and conquer and convert them and feed them some kale, if we could just somehow fix all these idiots, the world would be better. Well, it turns out, you suck, follow me, is not as persuasive as liberals apparently think. So it's a spiritual thing. You understand what I'm saying? It's a spiritual thing. If you love people, they listen. I love people. I work hard to love people. I mainly work hard to love myself, which is hard. But I love people. And the last time I went to jail, I wasn't marching with Black Lives Matter. Much as I love Black Lives Matter. The last time I went to jail, I was marching with coal miners who had gotten their pensions stolen and gotten their health care stolen by an evil coal company. And they were out there fighting these union guys with no help from progressives because they were Trump voters. And I thought to myself, well, hold on a second. If this evil coal company was hurting a spotted owl, every liberal in the world would be laying down in the streets. But you got these coal miners who are sick. By the way, just give me a second on this one.
Please.
I don't think I've ever told you this. I went to this rally mainly out of just humiliating embarrassment for progressives. This fight was going on, and they couldn't get any liberal support. I said, well, I'll take my dumb butt down there and give a speech. And I go down there to give the speech, and I got inspired, and I made a huge mistake. Again, when I left law school, I moved to the Bay Area. I was berserkly radical for a long time. So I know how to do a rally. That one thing I know. You learn in the Bay Area how to give a rally, how to march. And so after my little pep talk, I was like, let's lead them in the chant. And I was like, hey, hey, hi, and no response. And I was like, ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop. No response at all. And I'm like, these people are rude. And maybe they're racist. I mean, this is a good chant, man. And so one of the wives comes over, tugs me on the shirt, on the thing. And she said, Mr. Jones, they can't chant. They can't chant. They have black lung disease. They can't chant. And I looked, and I saw these guys for the first time. Some of them had their oxygen with them. Going on this march was for them a very difficult thing. They had gone down 3 miles into the earth for 30 years to keep the lights turned on for me and you. And they came back up with black lung disease. They came back up with emphysema. And now they're sick, and they can't see a doctor in America because somebody stole their health care and their pensions. And I'm supposed to hate these guys because who they voted for. So I said, look, you guys go to jail, I go to jail. But I'm not going to let you fight by yourself. Now, people say, well, Van, that's a great story, but did you change them? Did you fix them? Did they now start voting for Democrats? Did you fix these terrible people? And I said, no, I'm sure they voted for whoever they voted for, but I'm going to tell you this. We don't do what we do to change other people. We don't stand for justice to change other people. We don't stand for peace to change other people. We stand for these things because we don't want a hateful world to change us. We don't want a hateful world to change us. We don't want to become what we're fighting. We certainly don't want to feed what we're fighting, but we don't want to become what we're fighting. And so I haven't found a single word that made a difference for me in trying to get Republicans to help me, as they have, on climate policy or on criminal justice policy. What I found is a place of love and respect and connection that let them find their own words because suddenly they wanted to help me and not hurt me. That's what we have to do. We have to create a condition in which people find their own words. And that's why Dr. King says love is the most powerful thing. That's why Nelson Mandela refused to racialize that conflict and said he had in his mind a South Africa where there was honor for the Xhosa. Of course, he was Xhosa, that's no big deal. But he said that also there should be honor for the Zulus. He wasn't Zulu. And also honor for the Fula. He wasn't Fula. And also a place of honor for the Afrikaners, too. He had a vision for a South Africa that everyone had a place of respect. And it became very, very difficult to stop him because when you have that kind of love force, people would rather help you than hurt you.
Yeah, I just want to end, Van, by I'm listening to you. I was thinking that when we met on that escalator and we were having a green journey and how far we both come from there, and just listening to you, I don't know if I ever showed you, I changed my business card in 2015.
Thomas L. Friedman, humiliation and dignity columnist.
So
no, but that's it, brother.
The biggest lesson I learned. So, Van, you're just such a unique voice, and and courageous and true, why aren't you running for president?
I must have offended you somehow.
Not in this election. We all want, but seriously, I mean, forget this moment particular. But have you thought about at some point getting out from behind the commentator's desk and actually running for office?
No, because of what Mr. Singh said. You call me Mr. Jones, I call you Mr. Singh. That's good. No, because it's not a political problem. Everybody's got the wrong idea. My profession does you a massive disservice, and I try to acknowledge that. You would be forgiven for thinking something is not true if you consume my product, cable news product. You would be forgiven for thinking something is true that is not true. This is not a political problem. There are good people who run for office all the time. That's not the problem. You would think if you watched news all day that we just have too many awful people in the world and too many awful people in America to get anything done. If you watch us, you might think there's too many awful Republicans in the world to get anything done. You might think there's if you listen to some of my colleagues, you might think that there are too many awful Republicans who are racist, who are in a cult, who are crazy, and just can't get anything done. There's another station named after a furry predator. And if you watch them, you might think there are too many awful Democrats in the world who are all socialist and woke supremacists and race card players. And there's too many awful Democrats getting anything done. Or you might think there's too many awful white people getting anything done. Or you might think there's too many awful black people committing crimes getting anything. If you watch enough news, you will come to the conclusion there's too many awful people in this country to get anything done. And I will tell you something. There are some awful people. It's true. It's your smallest problem. Your biggest problem is we have so many awesome people in both parties. We have so many awesome people who are black, so many awesome people who are white and brown, so many awesome people in every faith group, so many awesome people who don't know each other and don't know what to do. That's your big problem. You don't have an awful people problem, you have an awesome people problem. And that's not political. That's spiritual, that's cultural, that's human. And I can name for you, if you took away the incentive structure, 20 people in the Republican Party and 20 in the Democratic Party who would be literally, you know them, beyond fantastic leaders. They aren't just forgetting to be good leaders. They're in a screwed up incentive structure. And so the calling on my life is spiritual, it's cultural. I want to do everything that I can to make it safe for good people to be good. And if out of my work, 100 people run for office and can do a good job, that's a better use of my time.
Well, I know what's, thank you, Don. I think I can speak for Ann and Nikki and Planet Word and to say this has been an incredible use of our time. So, Van, this is a blessing and a gift. Thank you for being here.
Love you, brother.